Tiff and Rach here.
We are the Nobodies, and this is our podcast. Welcome to week number 2 of term number 3 of part 1 of term number 3 and the accordion of time space continuum that is anatomy training, structural integration training.
It's been nothing other than immersive.
Indeed.
And all filled with the feels. We had a lovely weekend.
Every beach.
All the beaches.
4 beaches.
Yeah.
Beaches for bitches.
Oh,
We did an interesting thing of we went to the tide pools and we looked very micro at these tiny crabs that were the size of a pinprick. And then we looked deep into the distance and saw pods of dolphins at another beach. So we did this sort of zoom in, zoom out that mirrored kind of what we're doing as we look at bodies and watch them move and try to assist them in reaching fuller potential.
It's interesting because when we're working, we're often called in a body reading, which is kind of our assessment tool. It's looking at the relationships of the bones, so the structure of the skeleton, which is less about the structure and more about
how the soft tissues are
holding that structure.
Which
exactly.
Is the definition of tensegrity, which
Yes.
is something we play with. It's this idea of the bones being suspended in the soft tissues versus the skeleton being what's the deciding factor.
Because without the fascia and the soft tissue around it,
we'd be a pile of bones.
Just a pile of bones on the floor. But as I was going back to that whole idea of both going micro and then macro, we are called often to use our peripheral vision and to use that kind of side view and that offset, not staring at the thing, to glean and find the bits and pieces about that person's pattern that is more in the forefront. Which is interesting.
So basically, we are spending 500 hours perfecting our side eye.
Yes.
And mad side eye skills.
Yes, we do actually. But we had just a day back where we're focusing this week on the lateral line. So that's the side body. So that's what connects those first two that we discussed. So the superficial front line and the superficial back line. That's that lacing bit that goes all the way up our sides, which is also an area that is highly not touched in the realms of other body work.
Yep.
And
maybe you get a little drip around the side
of the
on
ribs,
your belly here and there, a little reiki doopy, but never any true attention to what's happening when many of us are hung in our side bodies, ourselves included.
I need to be jacked to actually get out the tire.
I've got my work cut out for me today. And so does she.
Oh yeah, we do. But we're looking at things now in what we call the coronal plane. So looking at somebody front to back. But technically we're looking at their front and side. Their back, but looking at them side to side.
So before we were in the sagittal plane and we're looking at sort of mostly the spinal curvature and if someone is positioned ahead of themselves or behind themselves in different areas. And now we're looking at those left and right sort of differences.
Yes.
And the lateral line can be very different side to side for people, as well as the next line, the spiral line.
And we had a day yesterday. Yeah. And we chose the afternoon.
Soupy doopy spiral yesterday. It was super special. And we'll be continuing to parse that apart. It is the spiral line. Let's just talk through it. So your right spiral line starts on the right side of the back of your head on a muscle zip code, really the fascia around splenius capitis. Then it crosses over to your left rhomboid, which is the zip code between your spine and your shoulder blade. Then it goes underneath the shoulder blade around the left rib cage on the serratus anterior, which makes this sling between the serratus and the rhomboid.
And it starts to scoop around.
Scapula glides on. Then it does a scoopy doopy, and it comes over through the external obliques of the left side, the internal obliques of the right side, and then down the right TFL IT band.
And then it goes down and across the front part of your legs anterior, scoops under your foot like a stirrup, and then comes up the backside all the way up to the side by your fibula, like on the outside of your lower leg, and then back up the back of your hamstring, and then to sacrotuberous ligament.
And then it gets really tricky because in gait, when you're walking, it goes up the spinal erectors of the opposing side, so the left side again. But in static position, it goes, if you're just standing there, the force transmits up the right side of the erector spinae, or those spinal postural muscles. So we have to take the spiral line and parse it out, and we have to look at it in really like 4 pieces and consider those contributions, because it could be it's very different person to person, but it could be different side to side and piece to piece, which part is long, which part is positioned short.
And talk about confusing that it goes from one side of the body to the other.
Oh, yeah.
That, like, truthfully, I've mapped the spiral line and know the line really, really well in my head. But when you're starting to look at people and to see where the contributions are, that's when that's when
the bones are your best friend.
Your bones.
You really have to get up and touch the bones and make those visual inferences based on the landmarks.
Yes.
Because the eye, the person's body, the way their underwear is positioned, anything can kind of confuse you or cloud your vision. And so I really like that reminder of like, go back to the bones.
I also look at, this is one of the things that we really were kind of being pushed into this idea that the body is a rotation. It all has a primary rotation. We are all these spirals.
Yeah.
And what's very interesting is that the spiral line is our, what we call the superficial spiral, which is the one that's more to the outside of our body. And they can be opposing the deeper spiral within us. From the core.
And your spine.
So, and when you look at this, we're looking at if we're looking at the process of the 12 series and going through the lines, we're trying to kind of unclothe the deeper line, pattern. Like the deep line, and those deeper rotations and where they're held. And sometimes the body reinforces those deeper ones using that spiral line. So if you had a rotation to your left, the spiral line also then mirrors that. But then you can have the people who their sleeve is opposing it.
Yep.
It's trying to counteract it. And it's so
fascinating.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Who does what? Where? And why?
And why do they do it?
Like, is it a function of their work? Is it a function of their sport? Is it a function of their psychology? Like, you can really go down lots of rabbit holes here, but it's so interesting. Like Rachel was saying, these first 4 sessions are unwrapping the present.
Yes.
We are going through, now it's called the superficial line. Sometimes we are deeper in the body than one might perceive for a superficial line, but they are the superficial that is covering what we talked about, the deeper core patterning that's happening in the spine and those deep muscles like your psoas.
Which are more primitive to the human being. Yeah.
That hold things more deeply.
Yes.
And carefully.
And very much so.
So it's fun to watch both our outside clients and each other as we unwrap this present, and we start to feel different muscles coming online and operating. And as we've been in our workouts, we've just been feeling lots of different capacities. Like I have this spiraling feeling in my body where my left leg is kind of just jorping around in a circle. And I'm like, I'm curious to see what happens after today and Thursday with that.
Well, we are headed off to Squala, and that is a terrible butchering. It's of what we do best.
It's sick and quick.
It is. Oh, yeah. So hope y'all have a good day.
Yep. Hope you are enjoying this week, and we will talk to you tomorrow. Bye.
Peace out.